seconds.
4 seconds. 2, 1.
Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, August 12th regular City Council meeting. D. Stiles Elliott, our City Clerk, would you please call roll?
Mayor Benjamin.
Present.
Councilmember DeLira.
Here.
Councilmember Fajarin.
Here.
Councilmember Guido.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
Great. For Mayor's announcements, the first thing I'd like to do is invite up our Library Director, so Stacy. So we have a new Library Director. As a council, you haven't had a chance to meet her. But Stacy, if you'd like to be able to give an introduction, let the council get to know you.
Sure. My name is Stacia Chinova. I'm the new Library Services Director here at Pullman in the Neal Public Library. I'm really excited for this opportunity to get to know the community better and really get to do some cool things at Neal. You might have seen me before. I am pretty local to this area. So I was last the Youth Services Manager for the Latah County Library District in the Moscow Public Library. And then before that, I worked for the WSU Libraries in the Access Services Department. So maybe a familiar face to some people. I'm really excited for this new role, and I know that the library is a gem for the city, and I am so excited to be part of it, and we'll do great things together. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And for that, I just want to make sure the council had the opportunity to meet you. So
Great.
come down to the library and get to meet her more.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, come check out a book.
On to community announcements. The first is obviously students are coming back, so this weekend is Lentil Festival. Hope to see you at the National Lentil Festival this weekend. Things kick off on Friday with live entertainment and activities of all ages. At Lentil Fest Friday, downtown on Olson Street by the Neal Public Library. Also make sure on Friday you join the Walk of Fame presentation at 6 o'clock at the Pullman Heritage Depot Center in honor of this year's Walk of Famers. And then come down to Rainy Park on Saturday. And don't forget, downtown we do have the parade also, but then after the parade, Rainy Park down on Saturday for a full day of fun, music, and chili. And I'll be down the Chili Bowl. Always look forward to seeing people there. Pullman Transit will be running a free Lentil Festival shuttle every 20 minutes between 11 a.m. and 10:15 p.m. on Saturday. You can park at the Safeway, Walmart, or the Living Faith Fellowship Church and get dropped off at the WSU Visitor Center on Main Street. For full schedule events, you can visit lentilfest.com. For transit routes, visit pullman-wa/lentilfest. Also, related transit, Pullman's Transit's fall service package will include changes to on-campus routes, express routes, and to the airport route. So you can visit pullman-wa.gov/transit to download the Pullman Transit app and see up-to-date bus route information. The City of Pullman is going to be transitioning to an all-new utility billing access portal this September. The new portal will give you more options to pay your bills, access your account information, and request service adjustments. You can visit pullman-wa.gov/utility to learn more about the update. Concert in the Parks. The 2025 Concerts in the Park season comes to an end tomorrow. So on Wednesday, we're going to have performance by Solstice from 6 to 8 p.m. in Rainy Park. And then registration for Parks and Recreation fall classes and activities starts on Wednesday, August 20th at 8 a.m. You'll be able to see the fall activity guide and register at pullman-wa.gov/rec. The Pullman Rec Center will be closed for maintenance from August 18th through the 25th. The front desk will remain open if you have any questions or need help with registration. And related to the library, upcoming event, State of the Aquifer, come to Neal Public Library on Wednesday, August 13th to learn about the state of the Palouse Groundwater Basin 2024 water usage and how usage affects our shared water source. And from the Water Conservation Coordinator for the Blue Space and Aquifer Committee. To see a listing of other community events, visit the city's tourism page at visitpullman.com/events. The last thing that I wanted to make the public aware of is we do have on the consent agenda an item that is related to funding from Innovia in order for us to put on a community table event. We're very excited about that and for Innovia's support in it. The event is right now proposed to be planned Saturday, September 13th, with the plan to close Kamaikan between Main and Olson, line it with tables, and invite the community to bring dinner and come down and have a community dinner together. So it's exciting, and there'll be more as we progress, more to talk about related to that. So that's for my announcements. On to non-agenda related community comments. This agenda item is the first of two opportunities during this meeting for the public to bring comments to the attention of the elected officials. Specifically, this item is reserved for public comments, concerns, or other information not related to a previous public hearing or final action on this agenda or a hearing tonight. Final action items include confirmation appointments, consent agenda, regular agenda items. This agenda item for comments will not exceed 30 minutes in total. Comments are to be directed to the mayor or the city council as a body. No comment should be directed to an individual council member, and per RCW doesn't allow for community comments to be used to support a political campaign. With that, is there anyone who would like to provide community comments on a non-agenda item thing? And I believe we have a couple. So if you can come forward, provide your name, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Go ahead. My name is Trevor Vance. I have a brief speech and then some documents to pass out to you. Tonight I'm just entering into the record a letter that I've written to the planning department and to all of you regarding short-term rental enforcement, or STRs. The ordinance was passed and residents were told that it was going to be complaint-driven, yet current actions such as outreach to Airbnb, VRBO, and targeted contact with specific owners and letters from aerial or signaling enforcement in 2026, whether or not complaints exist. This is showing a shift in policy without some public discussion. I've heard, from many residents, neighbors of mine, they're actively trying to comply and they're facing some unreasonable or arbitrary burdens. One example that I got was a $500 parking variance that they needed to apply for a 1940s or 1950s property with no off-street parking options. They even had demands to move smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, which were later walked back when challenged. I'm urging council to review and maybe even impose an immediate moratorium on STR enforcement under the ordinance, directing staff to maybe reevaluate the code with proper grandfathering. I'm asking all of you to consider this tonight so that Pullman can see where council stands. Thank you.
And you can provide those to D. Stiles, Elliott. Is there anyone else who'd like to provide a comment related to a non-agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to city council member comments. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you moving, Bobby. Please.
Good evening, Bobby Ryder with the Downtown Pullman Association. I have a couple of announcements. One is Francis mentioned the Friday night kickoff for the downtown. We have live music. It'll be a high energy performance by local cover favorites. There'll be 4 bands, and we'll wrap up with a headliner, country music icon, Muzzy Braun. There will be inflatable axe throwing, if that's really a thing, but we'll find out. Giant bowling and face painting and big fun for all ages, so bring the family. There's also an all-ages lentil crawl. You can stroll through downtown businesses and sample lentil-themed treats, discover the magic lentils in unexpected places. Grab your tickets for the lentil crawl. This is also all-age kind of event where you can explore downtown retail shops, bars, and restaurants offering lentil-inspired bites. and signature drinks. It's a fun and tasty way to sip, snack, and stroll your way through downtown Pullman. To purchase tickets, just go to downtownpullman.com. And then also, we have the Pullman Farmers Market is growing. We're excited to welcome vendors like Courage to Grow Farms from Lamont, alongside a variety of local food producers and talented crafters. Come visit us in our shady location behind the U.S. Bank and Scusi Italian Restaurant, who also happens to be one of our delicious food vendors. This week, Roger Johnson and Scotty Thompson will be performing their jazzy jug band tunes, and stay tuned for more updates about this vibrant new addition to downtown Pullman, or check out Pullman Market on Facebook, Pullman Market on Main on Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to provide a community comment? If not, then I'm going to move on to city council member comments. This agenda item is an opportunity for city council members to bring general comments on non-agenda item related to the attention of other elected officials or the community. Comments shouldn't be related to other items on the agenda. These comments should be given when the items is addressed on the agenda itself. So with that, Councilmember Fajarin, do you have any comments?
No comments other than welcoming the students back and safe travel for those who are still coming. And I'm excited for the Lentil Festival. I'll be buying my lentil crawl tickets tonight. So thank you so much.
Councilmember Parks?
I did want to welcome Stacy. I was part of your interview process, and I haven't been in to see you yet, but I will very soon. And the Gladish is having an event this Friday night. It's a band called Cloverdale. It's a husband and wife country music, and it is at 7 p.m. at the Gladish. Tickets are $20, and I think you can get them online or at the door. Thank you.
Councilmember Wright?
I too wanted to welcome Stacy, and we'll look forward to working with you. Welcome to the City of Pullman and Neal Public Library. Also, welcome back, students. It's awesome. You can already feel all the energy in the air, and a couple of us were lucky enough to work at the ice cream social yesterday, and after both bodies and ice cream melted in the heat, it was pretty exciting because we had so many students there, and the energy was just contagious. It was just great. And the last thing I'd like to mention is a thanks to Trevor Vance for bringing to our attention the issue with the short-term rentals. And while I haven't had a lot of time to review all the information that was provided, I certainly will take a look at it. And it's one of those things that as a city we need to continue to moving to that yes category rather than things that we can't do. So Trevor, you and the other signatees have my word that I will be looking into that for you. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Councilmember Guido?
Well, I too welcome Stacy as our new Neal Public Library Director, and welcome back students. And in that vein, I'd like to thank the people who have been sending in letters to the council with concerns around particularly ICE agents and their practices. I have real concerns about that and worries as a community that is diverse and has folks that may not have full citizenship. And I would like to see the city create a resource page on its website for folks so that they can know their rights. And I think that is a really important message that we can send our community as far as welcoming people of all different people are people and all different types of people. And I think that's extremely important. So I would encourage Megan and administration to look at creating a resource page at least with links and at the very least links, but a Know Your Rights page and information.
Councilmember Weller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, well, as everybody's already said, welcome back, students. Welcome, Stacy. I have the good fortune of knowing your family and saw you at the Johnson Parade, so that's awesome. We're getting some good energy out in the community, great energy at the library. I will say also, Trevor and I had talked a little bit, and you know, STRs, this is something that we should be very aware of when we pass things like this, proactive versus you know, complaint-driven responses and how we implement this. So thank you, Trevor, for bringing it up, and I'll pass it along.
Councilmember DeLira?
No comment.
So next item is for future agenda requests. Is there anyone who has a future agenda request? Councilmember Weller?
Of course it's me. So I'd like to explore hiring a government relations firm for federal and state, for both federal and state to explore revenue sources and other tasks. I've talked with 2 so far. They've explained that they can work with our own grants writer. Of course, they both work on retainer, have good relationships with our representatives at state and federal levels. So my topic is for us to explore this at a future meeting. I think it will help the city up its game and can provide more money here to the city.
Is there a second related to this?
Second that request.
And just so you know, this is something that we discussed earlier this year when we set the, actually last year when we set the budget, and we did not, as a council, we did not include it in the budget. So, but we will bring that back to see if you would like to do a budget amendment and what you would then like to take out of your budget that you have funded in order to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there any other future agenda requests? If not, we're now on to this community comments on final action items. This agenda item is the second of 2 opportunities during the meeting, actually 3 opportunities because we do have also a public hearing for public to bring comments to the attention of elected officials on any agenda item. The council will take final action item. This excludes the public hearing, however, would include anything that's on the consent agenda and regular agenda. Is there anyone who would like to provide community comment on any final action items? Is there anyone who'd like to provide comment? Seeing none, we'll close that. And we'll move on to presentations. Our first presentation, and let me check, Chief, do we have everybody here? We should have everybody here. Okay, great, because I know time, we're looking at time. So with this, I'll invite Aaron Beshears up, our police chief, in order to then introduce for the Maynard Price Post 52 and their American Legion Law and Order Awards. With that, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Chief, come on up. I'm going to turn it over from here to the American Legion. They recognize law enforcement officers for various good deeds and good acts, and we have a lot of great police officers in Pullman that they're going to acknowledge tonight for some of the things that they have done to help our community.
Thank you. Mayor, Chamber, good evening. Because of the number of awards to be presented tonight, we have prepared information on a basis for the awards and the names of the persons receiving the awards, and copies are available to anyone here tonight. Our first awards are for humanitarian and life-saving awards, which are not restricted to public safety personnel, but may be given to any member of the community who either has performed an act that results in the saving of a life or who has performed an act that is considered humanitarian in nature. I will call the names in alphabetic orders of officers. presented with certificates pertaining to this award. And please excuse me if I mispronounce your name. Officer Brianna Carpenter, 2 awards. Officer Jeff Gordon, 2 awards. Officer Darren Romero. Officer Jordan Schellebagger. Officer Kyla Straynecker, 2 awards. Officer Love St. Andre. Officer Ibrahim Talib. Officer Brock Westerman.
Got them all?
No.
Jeff Gardner? Aaron Romero? Jordan Schelleberger? Nicholas Dahlmacher? Son Andre? Well, thank you so much. Be seated.
Okay. 911 Operator of the Year. Criteria for this award is that the recipient be a full-time paid 911 operator selected from a public or private agency that is responsible for receiving 911 calls and dispatching fire, medical, or law enforcement services. The selected nominee may be either a call receiver or a dispatcher. Dispatcher, caller, taker, Mandy Nickerson, please come forward. Okay, in addition to our award to Mandy this evening, we would like to inform you that Mandy was also selected as the Department of Washington 911 Operator of the Year and received a plaque at the department convention in Spokane in July. Outstanding Law Enforcement Officer of the Year award, which is restricted to a member of local, county, or state law enforcement agencies. Our post requires that the officer's actions must have occurred in or been involved on the behalf of the city of Pullman. The Pullman Police criteria for this award is that an officer's work during the past year that best exemplifies excellence in the law enforcement contributions to the police department and the community. Sergeant Nathan Pataday, please come forward. In addition to a certificate for this award, his name is placed on a plaque of award recipients at the Pullman Police Department. This concludes the awards presentation tonight. We encourage any citizen or public safety official to contact our American Legion post at Post Office Box 24 in Pullman, 99163, any American Legion member or the Pullman Police or Fire Department with nominations for this year, 2025. Thank you very much.
I want to thank the American Legion for coming forward and recognizing and honoring our great police officers here. They really do a great job for our community, and this is just a small token for us to be able to recognize the things that they do. And we, for time's sake, we didn't go into great detail on the great things that each of them did. There's a handout at the back if you'd like to read about each of the instances where they saved someone's life. And all of these life-saving awards, someone is alive because of the actions that they took. So it does have a great impact on our community and the people who live here. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you get a chance, do read those, and it's also in the city council packet, so you could also read them online. But it is something that our first responders are saving lives very often, and it makes a difference, so I appreciate that. And you don't have to stay for the rest of the, but the kids do. So, no, we like them. Okay, next up for presentations, we have our Director of Finance and Administrative Services, Jeff Albrecht, on a presentation related to financial activity through Q2 of 2025. With that, Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about financial performance through 2 quarters, mid-year, and I'll share some things both for council consideration as well as public information. 2025 and 2026, we did do deficit budgeting on the general fund using cash reserves to balance that, so I'll kind of allude to some of that as we go through. Most of what I'll focus on tonight is the general fund, which covers a lot of our general city operations and is usually the one that is to be honest, most challenged financially. So we'll start with the general fund revenue. This is through mid-year, and you can see the 5-year comparison. So what we saw is solid growth in revenues in 21, 22, and 23. So coming really out of COVID, we saw solid growth. We've now seen that level off in 24 and 25. So a lot of our revenue sources have flattened and even in a few cases decreased. To date, we're about 14.7 million. That is slightly more than last year by about 200,000. I will caution that as a little bit, we did redirect some utility tax revenues temporarily from transit to general fund last year. So I actually would have expected that to increase by more. I would have actually expected it to probably increase by closer to 500,000 or 600,000. If you see what we budgeted was 16.4 million, that's not quite as dismal as it sounds. Some of that is timing related, about 1.3 million. So it's about a $1.7 million variance to budget, about 1.3 million, and that's timing related. So, so even though with that timing consideration taken in, we are still down in revenues of where we projected and very flat compared to where we have been the last couple of years. These revenue projections don't include anything related to the airport, so we do receive grant pass-throughs through the airports. They come in as a general fund, immediately go right back out to the airport. And then historically, we've received the CARES or ARPA funds through here. Those were back in 21 and 22. So that's where we sit kind of as comparison over the last 5 years on revenue. This is just kind of a reminder, probably as much for the public as anyone, but this kind of shows where the general fund revenues come from. So as you can see, the majority of it is from taxes. Property tax being the biggest one, it makes up about 31% of our revenues. Sales tax, the next biggest, other use taxes. So this is taxes on things like utilities, admission taxes, those types of things. And then we've got some smaller pieces of the pie, fines, fees, and penalties. This is fees for services that relate to the general fund. Fines, penalties issued, those types of things. And just a reminder, the general fund consists of public safety, parks and recreation, administration, community development. So when we talk about like fees for water, that's not included in the general fund. That we'll talk about later. And then we have some miscellaneous revenues. So sales tax is our second largest revenue source. It also has the most variability. Sometimes it's harder to predict. It has been pretty flat. Property tax is pretty consistent. We know how it is, but we are limited to that 1% increase per year in existing property tax. So that's something to keep in mind, is that pot only goes up by 1 a year plus new construction. So this is property tax. Again, as I said, it's very predictable, very consistent. We are down just a hair from last year. Again, that's more of a timing issue. We'll be up probably in that 1% plus the new construction, so probably in 1-2%, and that's pretty consistent. Every year, there's a few people that don't pay property taxes on time. We will collect the VAT eventually, either when the property's sold or through a lien in the property. So at some point, we'll collect all those property taxes. So that's a very consistent source of revenue. Just a reminder, we don't collect on university buildings, any government buildings or churches, which of course in Pullman is a higher percentage than you'd find in most communities, as that's a very big part of our property ownership in the community. And we definitely are seeing new construction slowing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, which has the potential to affect future property tax revenues. So here's our sales tax. Again, you saw really good growth in 21, 22, 23, and even early on in 24. It's not reflected here, as this is just through the first 6 months. It started to level off in 24. And we actually see a slight dip down in 25. So we had budgeted about 3.26 million. We're at about 3.1 million. So not significantly below what we budgeted, but it is slightly below what we budgeted and down a little bit from last year. So that's real important. It hasn't been a consistent trend. It's not like we've been down every month. Some months have been up a little, some months have been down a little. But overall, it's definitely showing a flattening. And it's something to keep in mind. This does not include the Transportation Benefit District. There is that 1/10 of 1% of Transportation Benefit District sales tax that is not in the general fund, so that is not reflected in here. So this is kind of a chart of some of our other revenues. So we have our other use taxes. So this is taxes other than the property and sales tax, the biggest piece being the utilities tax. So you see this compared to last year is up about $1 million. But again, the majority of that's in the utility tax, which is up about $900,000. And most of that increase is, again, that shift from transit to that. So it is up in general overall, but the biggest reason it's up is because of that shift, and that was a temporary shift. So that's not a revenue that we're hoping will be long-term, have to be here. Admission tax is there, and that can kind of create variability based off of ticket sales. The majority of that admission tax is generated through WSU events, athletic events, but there's a few other categories that fall into there. You see a pretty good drop-off in a license and permit revenue. Again, as we talked about, construction slowing, that obviously relates to permit revenue. We actually had a refund of a fairly large potential development that was looking to do a second phase that has decided to pull back from that at this point. We actually ended up refunding part of their permit fees for that because that project ended up not going forward. So we have seen a decline there. Our intergovernment revenues and grants. This is grant money from government agencies. This is also money, the one I usually call out is the marijuana and liquor tax. So this is for other agencies. Sometimes the granting can play a little bit in the timing, but those pass-through things like marijuana and liquor tax is pretty consistent. Even that you see is down a little bit. Our general government fees, fines, and penalties has been pretty consistent. Down a little bit from 2 years ago, pretty comparable to last year. And miscellaneous revenues is down. We saw a spike in 2024 on our miscellaneous revenues, and that was driven primarily by the opioid settlement money that we received, and we are still receiving money. But there was a little bit higher rate in 24 as a lot of those lawsuits payments kicked off, and some interest income as we were investing our cash balances. We have a little less cash than we did a year ago, as well as interest rates have come down a little bit. So moving on to expenses, here's kind of the graph. You see a little bit more consistent incline, I guess, in expenses. So you see that growth. There's a little bit of timing affecting in 24 that you'll probably see level out in the future, but we are seeing that growth. Through June, we've spent about $15.5 million in the general fund. We budgeted 15.8, so the good news is we are slightly better than performance budget. The bad news, though, as you saw, our revenues were slightly worse performing to budget, right? So the bottom line is we need to continue to maintain a gap here if we want to be sustainable. So this is something we've talked a lot about, of really trying to control expenses, trying to monitor those types of things. What we're seeing, though, is a lot of the expenses that we've been asked to absorb increases of things like utility costs, things like insurance that have seen fairly large increases over last year. The other thing we're seeing is we have a lot of partners that we work with that bill us for services. They saw those same increases, so of course that gets passed on to us in their bill for us, right? So as we partner with different entities in the community to provide services, they're seeing increases, which means they have to raise their rates to provide services for us. So we're getting hit on that a little bit too, and we're actually even seeing some partners that we maybe haven't paid for services before that are potentially looking to charge for services that they have for us. This is capital expenses. I always call it capital expenses separately because it kind of can really affect the timing. So really coming out of COVID, we had very little, if any, capital expenses. And that was 2 reasons. Is one, we had tried to hold back on some capital projects because we were unsure of financial future. 2, a lot of times we didn't have the ability to do those capital projects, whether it was lead time on materials or projects. So we really had deflated numbers really for a couple years coming out of COVID. 2024 was kind of our first normal capital year since 19. And you see that reflected here. We're pretty consistent. Our annual budget for this year is about $2.5 million in capital projects. That's funded through CIP and through Metro Parks transfers money for the parks capital projects. We did have some projects that were in progress from 24 that carried over to 25. So we've spent about $800,000 of that $2.5 million is what we spent so far. I think it's important is to really continue to try to control capital costs. That's something that we can control as a large expenditure as much as we can to try to reduce the overall expenditures for the city. So this kind of shows you what areas the general fund expenses go to. So police and fire, so public safety makes up about 2/3 of our expenses in the general fund. Not a surprise, those are the most expensive and are obviously the most critical services we provide to the community. The other next biggest slice is parks and recreation, and then finance and admin, which includes the administration, the finance department, the mayor, legal services, HR services, grants and communications. So a bunch of kind of small departments comprise that. And then community development and the legislative, which is the council expenses. About 71% of our operating expenses are related to personnel. So that's people. So which isn't surprising. We're in a service industry basically. So I'm going to break down by the different departments a little bit. Here's legislative expenses. You see some ebbs and flows in here. A lot of that's related to timing. Currently, it's over budget. That's actually related on timing on the paying to the county for some of our voter registration fees. It just came earlier than budget. That'll balance out over the course of the year. The one thing is with the primary, because we had city council seats that had multiple people, there will be additional cost for that election that we will have to pay, so that'll be an additional bill that we don't always see, either because it's not election year or because we don't have a primary, so that is something to keep in mind as a additional expense that we might not have had otherwise. Finance administration, you see a growth here. Part of that was the addition of the grants writer and communications that have happened since 21. So that's part of the reason you see those kind of little spikes in 23 and early 24. This is an area that has been fully staffed in 25 for the most part, as far as the first half of the year. We are over budget at this point. Some of that is related to timing. Some of that is also related to a few unanticipated expenses in administration and legal. I expect that to balance out over the course of the next 6 months. Law enforcement, again, you see growth. There's some timing issues in 24 that caused a little dip. Again, I'll see that level out. To date, their expenditures are a little over 4.9 million. Budget was a little over 5 million. So again, most of our departments are kind of doing slightly better than budget with the exception of a few. And again, it'll be important to try to maintain that variance as we're going to need to come in under budget on expenses if we want to be sustainable. Fire and ambulance has had pretty consistent growth. It really seems like it averages about 5 to 5.5% a year in growth. And again, all of these that I'm showing you now have capital costs pulled out of them, so it doesn't have the weird fluctuation. You know, if you buy a fire engine, you don't see this big spike in, that. So it provides a good comparison. Again, about $4.7 million expenditures through the first half of the year, budget of about 4.8. Good to see a little bit of savings, and we need to continue to see that. Community and economic development, again, seeing fairly consistent growth. Timing kind of causes that little flat and then bump up, and I believe that was caused by a short-term vacancy that was there in 2024. Again, performing slightly better than budget, about $900,000 in actual expenditures to about $975,000 in budgeted expenses. Library, you see a consistent growth. Library, a lot of the departments, but particularly library and recreation, you see a pretty good jump from 21 to 22. A lot of our expenses were deflated in 21, still with COVID restrictions, particularly library and recreation, because a lot of those activities were still under restrictions for a good part of 21. So that's why you kind of see that big spike, and then it really kind of is a consistent trend line up. They're right about on budget for where you thought they'd be at this point in the year. Parks and Recreation, again, you see some growth there. A lot of the growth, particularly in 24 and 25, that you see in expenses is related to increased participation, particularly in some of the participant recreation programs. That does bring in some additional revenue for a lot of those programs, but of course also has additional expense. So some of that increase you see, not all of it, some of that increase you see is offset with additional revenues through their program registrations. But again, they're coming in just a hair under budget on that one. So this just kind of shows the general fund annual, and this is annual numbers, so this isn't through 6 months, this is annual. So you can see our 21 through 24 actuals and 25 where we're currently projected to be. So you see 21 and 22, the revenues and expenses were pretty consistent. They were kind of growing at the same rate. And this does include capital. So what you saw in 23 is as we started to put capital expenses back, you saw that separation occur where expenses started to exceed revenues. You've seen the expenses kind of flatten out now that we're kind of back to a normal capital. It's still increasing, but at a much lower rate. But what's the bigger problem is you see that revenue line also flattening and with that slight decrease. And that's where we need to really continue to talk about long-term sustainability, because if that gap doesn't start to narrow, we'll set ourselves up for some tough decisions in the future. So that's it for the general fund. I'm going to move on to some of our other funds. These will be a little more concise. And the first is our streets and arterial streets. You see a big spike in expenditures in 2024. That is primarily related to the downtown project. This is where the expenses for the downtown project sit. Overall, as far as both operating and capital performing to budget or better, we've spent about $1.9 million of our $6.8 million capital budget so far in our two streets funds, and we're under in expenses compared to budget. Next is our utilities. So this includes our water, sewer, stormwater, as well as our capital utility projects. As far as expenses, pretty similar to last year. Operating expenses are a little bit over budget. That's related to some timing. I'm not concerned about that. The capital expenses, we just haven't expended a lot of our capital yet this year. A lot of the utility ones are fairly big projects, and so the bills kind of tend to come in at the end of the year. We'll start projects and the billing will come in. So overall, the utilities fund does well, but it definitely has a lot of capital liabilities going forward. Transit expenses, again, you see some fluctuation. Overall, operating budget and operating expense, I apologize, those are flip-flopped. The expense should be less than the budget. I apologize on that. They are coming in under budget. Through June, they had spent very little of our capital budget. If you recall from previous meetings, we just had 3 electric buses delivered, which obviously are a significant cost. The good news is a good chunk of those are reimbursable grants, so we'll get a revenue source come in to offset majority of that cost, not all of it. So there's a big capital investment that you'll see hit in probably July or early August on that. And then our internal service funds, so these are our equipment rental division, our buildings, our IT, and our GIS. So these are all funds that are internal services to the city. So really it's the city paying the city for providing services to itself. So the financial performance really impacts the whole city, even though they're isolated internal service funds. Again, you see a pretty good spike up. This one does have some variance for capital, particularly in our equipment rental division as we order replacement vehicles, those types of things. The timing of the year can really affect that. But currently they've actually spent a fair amount of their capital, which is fine this year. 1.5 out of 2.5 million and are projected to be on pace for budget. Civic Improvement Fund, this is also our lodging tax, is basically our revenue here. This is really just a good representation of kind of hotel lodging revenues from taxes. You see, obviously, coming out of COVID was next to nothing, right? You see the huge spike up, really saw good growth. It was one of our revenue areas that continued to grow strong from 23 to 24. Most of the other ones started to flatten. This will continue to go strong, but we are seeing the flatten actually at the slight dip now. Still overall very strong, still more than we have budgeted, but again, is one of those revenues that's flattening out and actually decreasing slightly. So a few final thoughts. The majority of our revenues continue to be flat or down slightly, and that's pretty consistent for most of our revenue sources. There's a few that are up a little bit, but most of them are not, at minimum, not seeing the growth that they were a couple years ago. Cash balances are being used to supplement increased expenses. So we've seen the increase in expenses, whether that be cost of living increases for staff, whether that be insurance, whether that be utility costs, whatever they may be. We're seeing those increases, and because the revenues are flat, that means we're using cash to offset those increased expenses. Again, we're seeing increased expenses to partners. Not only our direct costs, but our partners are passing on, because they're in the same boat as us, they're seeing increased expenses, they're passing it on to us, which is understandable, but obviously has an impact on our budget too. And I think it's going to be really critical to have careful evaluation of our expenses and revenues. We met with leadership earlier this week. We really talked about controlling expenses. I feel like our leadership did a really, really good job of putting together a reasonable budget, and we addressed a lot of that in the budgeting process. But at the 6th month, we had said we're going to evaluate where revenues are and expenses are about where we thought they'd be, and revenues are trailing a little bit. So we're continuing to face some challenges. Staff have really took on some ownership to try to address things where they can. And I think we're really going to need to continue to monitor how revenues trend. If we continue this flat or slightly down trend, or if we start to see some increases, it's going to be really important over the next 3 to 6 months. And how we evaluate things, particularly for 2026. We have enough cash balances to cover 2025 expenses. It's really, if things continue at this in 2026, particularly the end of 2026, where we'll start to really face some real challenges if things either don't turn around or we continue to try to address some of these. With that, I would answer any questions anyone has.
With that, any questions? Councilmember Wright?
Thank you, Jeff. As always, a very thorough and time value report for us. My question has to do with what you just talked about with the cash balances. And if you could just remind me about where we are percentage-wise in our reserves.
So year to date, we're probably in the, I don't have a number, I'd guess somewhere in the 15-ish to 20%, which is still above our target. What it is we would probably be pushing up against that target by the end of the year, and based on where we're at, then 26 we would fall under that target most likely.
Okay, thank you. I just kind of needed a ballpark there as to where we were.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Weller?
Jeff, could you remind me where the CIP, it's been a while since I've been on CIP. Does that come out of general?
It's actually across all sorts of funds.
Okay.
So I think our total CIP, the CIP that was approved for 2025 in the general fund was around $900,000, I think. And then we had some carryover projects, and then we had the metro parks, which gets transferred there. But almost every fund has some CIP projects in it. So.
Okay, and then I know earlier, a few months ago, we had decided to not do the, reader board, which was about $250,000. Does that just go back into like?
So that actually, because that was a future project for 2027, that was not actually a budgeted item yet. So we only budget the current year CIP. We use so the CIP is a 6-year, and this is probably more for public information, I think you know this, it's a 6-year look. We actually only use the first year of that as budgeting. Everything else is just for planning. So that actually hadn't been budgeted yet and won't be budgeted when we do the 27 budget.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Fitzgerald?
Thank you, Jeff. I wish our finances painted a rosier picture, but this is the situation that we find ourselves in. So I appreciate you being forthright on what needs to be done. Just a question, has the city ever done a comprehensive cost of service user fee study, or is it mostly done per department?
Mostly done per department. Yeah, so I'm not, and again, I've got 2.5 years of history, so there might be something, but I'm not aware of one that's been comprehensive for the whole city, at least not recently.
Thank you. I think, I'm just talking out loud, I think that's something that personally I might want to consider if we're looking at just long-term. I had another question, but of course it escaped my mind, so I'll let someone else talk.
Councilmember Parks?
That really makes me feel better. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. I so much appreciate this report and just how you present it. It's very clear and understandable. And I would just like to make a comment to our residents that right here we see the importance of doing as much business as you can in Pullman as often as you can. You saw just now what the revenue's doing, and we did have a setback last year and 2 years with our downtown, but now it's open and there are a lot of businesses down there. And we have a very active DPA now that does have the Main Street designation, which is huge, and because that opens the door to lots of funding so that the DPA can do more for not just our downtown, primarily our downtown, but also all businesses. So this is a really good illustration as to why we need to patronize our local businesses who are owned by our friends and neighbors who live here primarily. So I just wanted to say that, and hopefully we'll get out and use our funds wisely and get a better report for Q3. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Fitzgerald.
Came back to me. More so for the entire council. When can we expect the next, us to get started on the next budget cycle, to work on the next budget cycle next year?
So if we're looking at what that process is, that process starts with goal setting. So when the new council comes on board, one comes with confirmation of election, the other two come at January 1st. We will then start the goal-setting piece where there is community comment period time. There's then the evaluation of the community comment, which then leads into then setting of the goals, which then we use, so myself and Jeff use in order to start working with the planning for the budget through all the department heads, and then it comes to council later in the fall of next year. So we're a year out in the process from it coming before council because it's for the following year. Now, one of the things that Jeff and I have talked about is if you look at where the numbers are at, we may, and not that we want to, talk this way, but we may need to come back with the budget amendment that actually reduces budgets later this year in anticipation if we don't get a good change with what we're seeing with our revenue numbers. But I definitely want to say we're watching. I mean, we're doing a lot of watch on budgets. Our department heads are, they're really working to hold the line and make sure that they're not overexpending. And I definitely appreciate all the people that are involved in this. It's not just Jeff that's doing this, but all our staff are all involved. Any other questions or comments? Any last thoughts, Jeff? Okay, thank you very much. The next item is the consent agenda. Items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by single motion of the council without separate discussion. With that, I'd entertain a motion to read the consent agenda by title only.
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes. And with that, if you could read the consent agenda.
Thank you. The first item is a motion to dispense with the reading of the July 22, 2025 meeting minutes and approve them as submitted. Item 2, a motion authorizing the purchase of 5 advanced life support cardiac monitors. Item 3, a motion to ratifying change order number 1 to the decant facility contract. Item number 4, a motion to approve disbursements for electronic transfers numbered 394 through 402 and 405 through 408, totaling $1,202,373.28. Item 5, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 2011-31375 through 2011-31587, totaling $2,945,318.90. Item 6, a motion authorizing the mayor to transfer the surplus SCBA compressor fill station to Sandpoint Fire Department. Item 7, a motion authorizing the acceptance of $2,500 from Innovia for a community event. And finally, item 8, resolution number R-31-25, a resolution declaring certain property of the city of Pullman to be excess and surplus property and authorizing the means of disposal.
Do any council members desire to have any items removed from the consent agenda to be discussed separately? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. Second. With that, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item up is our public hearing. And this is a public hearing for the use of fireworks at Washington State University events. Thank you for those that have waited, an hour into the city council to get to this process. What we'll do is staff will provide a report related to the code. From then, I'll open the public hearing to hear from those that'd like to provide comments. There is no, I ask, and we'll, with comments, and then after that, it'll be council member comment opportunity. With that, Jeff?
Thank you. What I'm going to present to you tonight, I have to give credit to Jaron Jones, our fire marshal. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to be here tonight, but he put a lot of this information together, put a lot of research in there. He's also one that deals with the permitting process, so he's really familiar with this. So I'm going to share a lot of information on his behalf and certainly can help answer questions if needed. What he prepared was kind of a little bit of a history as well as some references to code. The history, just so you kind of know, just really based off of records retention schedules, and that really is the last 10 years. I think there was probably a few events that probably happened prior to that were maybe a little less regular, but really based on records retention and just even relevancy, we focused on the last 10 years. So really, we're going to talk about 2026. Those who've been around a while, you remember the cannon used to always fire off at Cougar football games, and they kind of started to phase that out. And that's about the same time that they started to see a little bit of an increase in fireworks. And I don't know if those were necessarily specifically designed that way, but that did happen to coincide. Basically, the majority of the fireworks used at football games are proximate fireworks. So these are the ones. If you go to the Cougar football games, they have kind of the flames and the stuff as the players run out of the tunnel. That's actually the majority of the fireworks, and that is something that is required to be permitted. So it's not the high fireworks that you see that you might see on the 4th of July, but those are required to meet that. And basically, those don't produce hazardous debris. They're pretty contained. But they do have some more display fireworks that they do occasionally at Cougar football games. All of their fireworks are done through a company called Pyro Spectaculars North, and they're actually a nationwide. They actually do a significant amount of athletic events. They've done the World Series before. They do large-scale 4th of July shows. It's really boiled down to commercial-wise. There's not a lot of companies that do it because there's a lot of regulation and a lot of things involved in it. So that's who they currently use and do that. Use for the majority of their events. And then, of course, regardless of that, it has to be legally permitted by the city and the fire department for any use of fireworks for professional services. So the types, again, they range in a variety of light and noise. They do a lot of different things depending what they do. a lot of times after touchdowns, there'll be audible fireworks to celebrate the touchdown. I think that was kind of the replacement of the cannon potentially. They're kind of a one-shot thing. Pretty common use. Baseball stadiums start to use these a lot. Vista Stadium is a local example. I think they do them, I don't know if it's after home runs or after wins, but I know I've been to games where they've done them. Just to kind of give you a bit of a location of where they are. So the larger, kind of more display ones are fired off at the top of the football complex, which is located in the end zone. And then, of course, they have the ones that are kind of used at the entry during announcements that we talked about that are more the proximate ones. These are typically not quite as big as you would see at, say, 4th of July celebration because there's some limitations on how close you can have of people when these are lit off. So the top of the football complex creates a certain amount of barrier between crowds, but not as big as you'd find at, say, the 4th of July celebration or some of the really large ones. But they do fire some off up in the air to a little bit higher level. Baseball, really, again, I think they had a few sporadic ones before 2017, but have become a little bit more regular since 2017. Not quite as frequent as football. They typically use the larger ones. So what they use is pretty similar to what you would see in Sunnyside Park on the 4th of July. Probably not quite as long of a show, but very similar types of fireworks as you would see in that type of setting. And so, of course, they have a bigger fallout area, so they need more space around the fireworks. That way, in case something happens, you don't have people in the way. Again, they use pyro spectaculars north, and again, they have to be permitted. Just so you know, the permits are actually not filed by applied for by WCU. They're actually filed by Pyro Spectacular. We'll reach out and confirm that, obviously they're okay to be on WCU, but it's actually the contractor that actually files the permits. So again, this is where you see they kind of light them off the hill, kind of off toward the north old golf course. If you go up towards South Ferry Playfield, so obviously there's a lot more space that they can block off, so that's what allows them to use slightly bigger fireworks for the baseball games than they do the football games. Darren pulled the permits. Basically, there's a permit, with the exception of COVID year, obviously, they pulled a permit for every home football game. At minimum, I think they were doing the proximate fireworks that were done for the entry, and in some cases, larger fireworks. And then the baseball games, it's anywhere from 0 to 3. 2022 was the high with 3. On average, about 1 a year, a little less than 1 a year is what they were doing for baseball. So a few things about permitting. So everything has to be done through the Pullman Fire Department per the city code. And WCU is an allowable entity to do commercial fireworks displays. And that code covers everything from permits and fees and requirements. The RCW, which is the state law, is what was adopted by the city. So that's kind of the basis of the fireworks display, and then the city has some more restrictions. And that covers commercial and personal use, and personal use is restricted by the state for about a week in July, and a small period in July, around July 1st, it's more restrictive in the city, where it's just a couple days. So what do they have to do to get a permit? They have to obviously apply. They have to get the Washington State Public Fireworks permit. They have to give the information on the pieces and shells and the number and everything. They have to demonstrate proper management for storage, diagram of the grounds, obviously provide proof of procurement and security bond, and liability insurance. And so again, the company actually is the one who files the permit, and they're able to provide all this. We'll reach out to WCU, make sure it's an officially sanctioned WCU event. They're not just doing it for somebody else or whatever the case may be. And then once the review is complete, we basically invoice them, this is the cost, and the permit's issued upon payment. And then, of course, there's an on-site inspection that occurs the day of to make sure that they're complying with all those requirements. So RCW, which is the Revised Code of Washington, 7077 is what addresses fireworks. And it's really important to know that actually, kind of by basis, fireworks are generally legal from a commercial use. There's not anything that prohibits commercial fireworks in the state of Washington. There is some restrictions put on it, but generally they're considered legal. There are some restrictions, and then it's not uncommon, entirely uncommon for local authority to put further restrictions on those. And then basically the other thing the RCW does is it gives authorization to Washington State Patrol and local entities to administer and apply those. One thing that's important is any ordinance adopted at a county or city level that is more restrictive than the state law must have an effective date no sooner than 1 year after their adoption. So it allows a grace period. If you want to do something more restrictive than the state level, you basically have to do that and then give 1 year's notice to the community or whoever it is so that they're aware of that change. So that's just a little bit of history and kind of a high-level look at kind of the law and how it's been administered here in Pullman.
Thank you, Jeff. And with that, I'll then open the public hearing. And with this, so anyone who would like to provide comment, I do ask that you keep the comments to 2 minutes, but we won't have a maximum total time, so everybody has a chance to provide any comments they'd like to make. So at this time, if anybody would like to provide any comments as a part of the public hearing, if you could please come to the microphone and go ahead and provide your comments. Once again, would anybody like to provide comments? If not, I will close the public hearing. And with that, then I turn it to the council, and really, you asked for a public hearing related to the specific, our code 3.16.015 related to that. And with that, I would look to council. Is there anything, any comments you have, or is this, and this is really pertinent to this specific code? And with that, Councilmember Weller.
Yeah, well, I know we're talking about the code, but this is also going to go into a little bit other stuff. So,
well, no, this is specific to the code, so we need to stay on the code.
First of all, I don't think that the code needs to be changed personally. So that's the first part. So I appreciate the information provided by Fire, and I think, as I mentioned, because I sent an email to the mayor, Jeff, and our fire chief, that there were instances as far back as 2013. And so I know that, and I had expressed this, and we had talked a little bit, that the history is not necessarily complete and goes further back. I will say, and I know this because it was sent to Mayor Johnson and myself back in 2013 about different instances and then forward. So I could have provided some of that information, and I'm sure WSU could have, and that would have helped. I think it is important, first of all, to thank the mayor for the ability to address this in a meeting, in a public meeting, because I know this is something that people have been contacting me, asking me about it since 2013. So I appreciate that their concerns have been heard and addressed in a public meeting. As I mentioned in the past meeting, the responses I received was on both sides and sometimes pretty brutal. I was pretty destroyed on social media, and that's okay. That's also good. There was a lot of feedback. It was good to hear everybody's opinion. With every challenge, there is an opportunity, and I do believe the opportunity for the city is to use this to further educate on our community on when event with WSU, and that private use of fireworks is prohibited outside of the appropriate times. As I also discussed previously, we have an awesome opportunity that will open new doors of connection and communication between WSU and the city. As I mentioned, I contacted the MRSC, which handles various questions from elected officials pertaining to many topics, including legal and procedural, and I asked about event information from the university. They felt that sharing that information is allowed. In addition, I researched other university towns such as Bellingham, Cheney, Ellensburg, and others on how they navigate the town-gown relationship. I was happy to find that there are many examples where college information is shared on city websites and social media. In fact, Cheney has a section focused on students, the West Plains Chamber of Commerce, and merchant associations. Bellingham links to many different educational organizations, including Western Washington, local school district, and Ellensburg shares links to Kittitas Chamber, Central Washington. What I'm trying to say here is this is not necessarily a problem or a challenge that we can't get through, and I've heard a lot of comments from people on this. This is a really big opportunity that has just been a failure of communication, I believe, on our side as a city. In the future, I could see our City of Pullman website being a hub of information for WSU on particularly the fireworks to help inform the community, but also local organizations, even Spokane Falls Community College, the school district, Chamber of Commerce, or other nonprofits. As long as we aren't advertising for any businesses, I could see this update that has come from this topic, that has come from this challenge, being a big boon for the community, increasing our economy, elevating voices and organizations in our community. So I wanted to be able to explain the proposal that I had done last week in relation to the topic that I had brought up.
And that's not related to what we're talking about here. We're talking about here.
I think
is
I
the
shared
code.
my feedback on, I think it needs to stay the same. But I also think that we can increase and not face this in the future. So
any other comments related to the code? Councilmember Guido?
So I just have a question, and maybe Darren didn't share this in his research or didn't. I'm just curious, the phase out of the cannon, why that was done.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think, because that wasn't a permitted activity, I don't think, at the time, so I'm not sure if that was.
Kind of keeping up with the times kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it was probably more.
And was
just a
that
change.
permitted as well? Did they
I
have
don't-
to get a permit?
Not that I'm aware of. If it was, it would have probably been more of a noise ordinance permit than a fireworks permit, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Any others? If not, what I hear is no action going forward with this. So with this, next on to regular agenda items. The first item we have up is ordinance 25-14. And Chief Bashirs, I have you up for our first item.
Hello again. Mayor, can you remind me, is 14 the rental registration, or is that the
Yes,
solid
it
waste
is.
container?
Is
Okay.
the rental one.
There was two items tonight, is why I asked that. So rental registration. And I want to make sure that we clearly separate this from the short-term rental registration. These are two different topics. Rental registration is something that occurs when landlords, property owners in town, they register their properties with the city of Pullman, with the police department, and the reasoning behind that is based upon a state law requirement that entities within law enforcement are required to make a notification to the property owners or landlords whenever there is certain qualifying events that occur on their properties. And most of those are public safety events, crimes that occur, domestic violence, et cetera. We're required to make a notification to those properties to let them know that there was some sort of public safety incident that occurred on their property, so them as a property owner can take appropriate measures if necessary. That's the state law that requires us to make notification. What we did, and this was before my involvement, is a Pullman City Code established the rental registration, and that is a current code that is in place right now. What I am proposing this evening is that we make some changes to that code to help the police department as well as to help some of our landlords and property owners in town to kind of make it more efficient is the word that I would use here. Currently, what is required is that property owners are required to register their apartments with the police department every year. And there's a form that basically they fill out that provides contact information so that we can notify them if there's an emergency. That information is also used by our police officers to make that notification in the case of an emergency, as well as by our records department in the event that they need to make a notification that a certain qualifying event occurred on those properties. When I looked at this from the sense of efficiency, having landlords register a property every single year, providing exactly the same information that is already, we have already gathered that information, is pretty inefficient and a waste of everyone's time. My staff has processed about 1,200 of these registrations, and an initial registration takes approximately 15 minutes for our staff to input the information into our system, and that is not an efficient use of our staff time, especially if it's information that has already been provided once. This also puts a burden upon the landlords and the property owners to every single year to come up and provide us with the same information over and over again. And so what I'm looking for a change is landlords should only need to require to register the property one time unless there is a change in ownership or a change in contact information, so that the police department can provide those notifications for emergencies and for the requirements by state law. That's essentially the goal and the general overview of looking at the rental registration changes that we have proposed. And with that, are there any questions in general about what we're proposing?
So any questions to the chief? Councilmember Weller?
It's a great idea, Chief. I know we've received some feedback regarding year after year. My question is, how will you know if there is a change to ownership?
If there is a change in ownership, likely what will happen is if we respond to something and we're going to notice there's a problem. And as far as proactively looking for changes in ownership, that's not something that I have staff time to do. And essentially, we've treated those problems, using an analogy of if a police officer pulls a car over and for not using their turn signal, and then they notice, well, your registration's expired. Kind of that same analogy. We're not proactively looking for these registration violations, but when we respond to some other property problem, then we discover those. And that's, essentially, it's not a problem until it's a problem.
Councilmember Guido?
My question is concerning property managers. And what we were hearing from one particular property management company was that some landlords didn't want to provide their contact information because, in fact, they feel like that's why I have you, property manager. Is that an issue?
So I did receive feedback along those lines as well. And what another proposal that I am making is that if you are a business, an entity, a corporation, et cetera, that you would not provide a full identifying information, i.e. your date of birth, because you are a corporation, a business entity, et cetera. If you are an individual, we're still requiring that you provide identifying information because there are a lot of John Smiths in the world, and we need that specific identifying information to know which John Smith owns his property, what is the contact information, et cetera. It's a practical matter rather than an information gathering tool.
So at this time, there would be no change to the current process of what's required as a part of the registration?
The only change would be that a business entity would not be required to provide a date of birth, but if you were a individual, then you would be required to provide that.
Councilmember Parks?
Thank you. That was one of my questions. The other one is, and this is just an idea, would it be possible to set up in the system automatic messaging that goes to the owners? And I would also say the property managers, because they're going to be probably more knowledgeable about some of these things. And just an email that goes out every year that says, hey, have you had any changes? If so, you know, just kind of a PSA, if you will.
Yes, that's absolutely possible, and it's something that my staff and I have been considering, and we are planning on, if this is adopted, to do some outreach through social media. We've also been considering some other options to make sure that property owners, et cetera, receive that information and understand that, yes, you are required to register your properties with the Pullman Police Department. There are a number of properties in town that have not registered their properties with us that we are not even aware of because we've never responded to a problem on those properties. You know, if it's a finely operated business and the police never go there, we're not even aware that it should be registered. And so we're going to communicate that those properties still need to be registered according to code.
And thank you. And could I also ask, is this information shared or integrated with Whitcom so that it comes up for them as well?
It is. Previously, there was an online access point for property managers to provide the registration. That program became outdated and broken, and we have stopped using that. How we're currently entering it is our record staff is manually entering a paper document into our Spillman record system, which can be accessed by Whitcom, so police officers in the field can immediately get the information in case of an emergency to make contact.
Thank you.
I wanted to see if others first. Councilmember Wright?
Thank you, Chief, for the information. It's very helpful. My question is, for those that are currently in the registration process, is there going to be a new start time in which they register so that everybody is kind of on the same page other than new people coming in?
I would have to ask Thad to look at the specific details of that, but the intention of the change was if you are currently registered, you are registered.
You're good, okay.
You are grandfathered in, you are currently registered, unless there's some part of the code language that does not allow that, and I would have to have Thad respond to that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Weller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Chief, one thing came to mind. All right. Hypothetically, because I've experienced this, so not hypothetically, let's say you can't get a hold of the landlords, you know, old school, and they have somebody who's been living there for a very long time and is essentially a, you know, managing, but, you know, not that title. Do you keep trying the landlord, or do you eventually talk to the individual living there?
It depends upon the circumstances of the call.
Okay.
If it's an emergency call and we're there for emergency X, we're going to try to go through, you know, our normal process, which would be, well, let's find who's considered in our system the responsible person for the property and try to make contact with them. If we cannot do that, then we just start searching for the next best plausible person. And oftentimes, you know, if we can't, if tax sifter, we can use that as a resource as well to look who is the owner of the property if it's not registered properly. We can also talk to the tenants who live there and try to use them as a resource to determine who are the people that we need to be talking to. If we don't have it in a registration, then we have to start investigating and using all resources available to us.
I appreciate that there's some flexibility because there are some properties that are owned by people that are not here, and they're single owners, not necessarily having a management, and they do rely on people who are living in that to take care of, you know, updating and so on. So thank you.
Councilmember Guido?
I guess not really a question, but I think it's important that we have a registration process, obviously, and we do, just because often from a housing perspective, we take a wild guess at how many rentals we have in the community. It would be really helpful to get a more accurate count for that. So I'm encouraged to hear that you're going to be putting out notices or through social media, et cetera, saying, hey, there is a registration process and you need to do it, making it as easy as possible for doing that, whether it's online or, it shouldn't be a big, arduous thing, is my comment there. I guess the other one that was alarming to me, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but when there was a murder that happened up on campus, and we heard from the property manager that they were not notified of that. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Well, I don't want to cast aspersions, but I would refute that.
Okay.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, with that, I'd entertain a motion
Mayor.
for adoption.
Mayor, can I interject here?
Yes.
So Thad and I were just looking, what we realized is while the one attached in board docs has all the changes, it actually doesn't have the full code in it. So there's some pieces that aren't shown in there. They weren't meant to be changed and weren't intended to be changed, but they're not in that piece. So based on that, I would potentially suggest tabling this and we can bring it back next that has the full document in it.
Great, that's important. So at that time, we'll end this discussion.
Okay.
And we'll move on to item number 2. And Chief, you're up with this one for ordinance 2515 related to solid waste.
Okay. This ordinance change is to clean up some code language, and specifically, there is a reference in the enforcement of solid waste containers, and we're not asking for the general requirements of solid waste containers ordinance to be changed, but the actual enforcement. And the process refers to a city hearing officer. And that is a pretty outdated process, and when you ask city staff, who is the city hearing officer, there's a lot of crickets because it's not a process that I'm aware has been utilized. And so that's not something that we're using or we're even familiar with. So the goal here is to update this code to be treated as any other potential infraction so that individuals can receive due process if they were to contest a ticket and go through the district court as any other infraction would. So that is the primary reason for the code request change for the solid waste containers. The infraction would remain as a Class 3 civil infraction, which is the lowest infraction amount for not removing solid waste containers within 24 hours.
And that's something that we did have a problem in the board packet to where we emailed you the correct one that had the strikeouts. In the packet was the final markup. So the final markup is correct. It was just so you had that. So with that, any questions of Chief related to this? Councilmember Weller.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. So this is relating to people picking up the trash can off of the streets and then putting it.
Yes.
How actively do we monitor that?
Typically, this is something that we're responding to whenever we see a problem. And the example that I'll use, and we pulled some statistics for this, and we're responding to, or we pulled cases for less than 24 of these in the last year, which is an inaccurate statistic because when we pull a case number, if there has been a wind event and garbage cans are spread down the road in certain areas of town, we'll pull one case number and talk to, a dozen houses under one case number. So that statistic is a little bit misleading as to how many we're actually contacting regarding this issue. It is something that happens proactively by our code enforcement officers when they are out patrolling areas of town that we've had significant issues at. And the College Hill area is one of those areas that does get proactive enforcement in this area.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say, I'm thinking of an area where those garbage cans, they do not move from, and that causes problems with cleaning up the streets, quite frankly. And, okay, well, I appreciate the answer.
Okay, Councilmember Delira?
I just have one quick question. So is the current practice to issue a warning, and even though the original ordinance has the notice of violation, have you guys been skipping over to notice of infraction in practice?
So the way that our staff has been approaching this is always from an education and warning standpoint first in order to gain compliance with the code. And Jericho, how many tickets have we ever issued for this in the last year?
I cannot think of one time we've issued an infraction for it.
So it's more education and trying to gain compliance that way. So we're not writing a lot of tickets for this. And if we can gain compliance through education and outreach, then that's what we'll do.
I'm not seeing any other discussions. With that, I entertain a motion for approval of ordinance number 2515.
So moved.
Second.
And second. Thad, could you please read the ordinance?
Yes. Ordinance number 25-15, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Pullman, Whitman County, Washington, relating to Title V, solid waste collection and removal, and other matters properly related thereto.
With that, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Thank you, Chief. Next up, our third ordinance. So Jeff Albrecht, our Director of Finance and Administrative Services, back up for ordinance 2516.
Thank you. What's before you is ordinance 2516. This is an acceptance of a monetary donation from Jim Everman and Maureen Curtin Everman in memory of Noah Stephen, Francis Everman, USMC, and George Stephen Everman, USN. This is a donation for Veterans Park. If you remember, led really by our local Legion, started fundraising for Veterans Park, which is land that we purchased about not quite 3 years ago, located next to the cemetery to develop a park there. The Legion has really led a lot of the active fundraising, and this is a donation in the amount of $25,000 that we would look for the council to accept. It's very generous support for that project.
With that, any questions of Jeff? Councilmember Parks?
First, I'd like to thank the Evermans for such a lovely donation, but as the daughter of English teachers, I would like to point out that I believe the name Francis is misspelled in the ordinance. Unless it isn't, it should have an R. Francis?
Noah Stephen Francis.
Yeah.
It's possible. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure.
It's okay. Just thought we'd catch it now. Thank you.
Any other? If not, then I'd entertain a motion for approval.
Move to adopt ordinance number 25-16.
Second.
Thad, please.
With that change.
With that change.
Yes.
With the amended change. Thank you.
Ordinance number 25-16, an ordinance accepting a restricted monetary contribution from Jim Everman and Maureen Curtin Everman in memory of Noah Stephen Francis Everman, USMC, and George Stephen Everman, USN, to the City of Pullman to be used for Veterans Park.
With that, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks,
And next up, we have Valerie Weaver for the Grants and Special Projects Manager for our next 3 agenda items. So Valerie.
All right. Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and council members. Let's see if I think I can drive here. All right, this summer I've been working with our Public Works engineering staff to prepare 3 different grant applications for 3 different funding programs all through the 2025 Transportation Improvement Board grant cycle, which opened on May 16th of this year with applications due this Friday, August 15th. And the first of those, first item of business here, is an application to resurface a portion of Bishop Boulevard from Grand Avenue to Fairmount Drive. That's shown in yellow here on this map. And this is through TIB's Arterial Preservation Program. I can show you, this next slide has some photos of some of the conditions currently up there on this stretch of Bishop Boulevard. We've had success with this particular program. This summer, it funded the Orchard and Valley Drive resurfacing up by campus, by Beasley and the Student Rec Center. So this project would consist of a 2-inch grind and overlay, along with the necessary curb ramp improvements at various intersections in order to comply with the ADA standards. So if successful, this would fund just under $564,000 of the total project cost, which is estimated at roughly $682,000. TIB will be reviewing grant applications over the next coming months and announcing their selections typically just before Thanksgiving. And if awarded, the city would then proceed with project final design work so that we could do this work, this construction, in the summer of 2026. And in the packet, we included the TIB grant application package in a final draft form and provided that for you. And staff is requesting that council adopt the resolution before you tonight, which will allow us to submit the grant application and then execute the grant agreement if awarded. And I would entertain any questions you might have on this project here on Bishop.
Without any questions?
Application.
Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to adopt Resolution R-32-25.
Second.
With that, if you could read it, please.
Yes. Resolution number R-32-25, a resolution authorizing the execution of a Washington State Transportation Improvement Board grant application for the Bishop Boulevard resurfacing Grand to Fairmount project, authorizing the acceptance and execution of the grant agreement if awarded, and other matters related thereto.
With that, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Valerie, on to number 2.
Okay, next we have the second application here is for a sidewalk infill project on Liebecker Street near the WSU campus and McGee Park. This is through TIB's Complete Streets program. And on the east side of Liebecker, highlighted in yellow there, there is no sidewalk because of the topography. There's a hillside going up to the church and the child care center. I think this has come up before and has not been able to be funded because it's for the stretch of sidewalk being so short, and it's very expensive because of the sidewalk, or because of the hill. You have to build a retaining wall there, so it's kind of a small section, but an expensive section. So hopefully we can go after some funding here to solve this issue. There's a crosswalk on Stadium right there that's getting a rapid flashing beacon as we speak. It's being installed, so we're upgrading that intersection, but right past the intersection, we have a termination with no sidewalk. So we end up with a lot of students or pedestrians in general coming from apartment land and the neighborhoods up there and funneling down Liebecker and just walking in the road because there's no sidewalk. They figure it's the short little jaunt to the crosswalk, and they just stay in the roadway there. So we would like to get them this sidewalk. The project will consist of building a modular block retaining wall. I can show, here's a little image of the view on the ground. 265 linear feet of sidewalk, and the necessary ADA curb ramps would also be included. And so if successful, the TIB would fund roughly $195,000 of the total project costs, which is estimated at just under 229, or just under 230,000. So if selected in November by the TIB, city staff would also move forward with final design on this project for a summer 2026 construction timeframe. And this packet also included the draft application, and we are requesting council adopt the resolution before you to allow staff to submit the grant application and, if awarded, execute a grant agreement.
Okay, with that, any questions? Councilmember Weller?
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. This is awesome. I tell you what, I have walked that every single day, and College Hill Association came, what was it, many years ago, to say we needed a walk, a street or sidewalk there. And I was so dumb. I said, no, we don't need that. And I walk by there every single day. I'm one of those people who walks in the middle there.
Yeah.
Every single day, and I just kick myself for it. So this is awesome. I do have a question. Crossing Upper Drive, are there going to be kind of a, there's no...
Stripes?
Yeah, there's no stripes.
That's a good question. I am not sure at this point, but I can bring that up to Kara Haley, who's part of the engineering, the design on it, and ask her that.
Rad.
Yeah.
And then the other one is crossing Liebecker. It just stops. The sidewalk just stops on the other side.
So you're asking about continuity on the other side?
Yeah, if it's even a thought.
Probably, again, another question for engineering. I think maybe the idea is we at least get continuity on the one side that is adjacent to the crosswalk, adjacent to McGee Park, where people go up through that path. So there might be right-of-way issues with the houses there on the west side, but for now, I think we're at least trying to get continuity on the east side of the street.
Hey, if we just get that, golden.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but it does just stop there, and that's not the side we need. We need the other side, so.
Councilmember Guido?
Just more of a personal comment. 25 years ago, I lived on Liebecker, and I remember thinking it needed a lot of help in terms of, the sidewalks. And it still does, 25 years later. So thank you for looking at this and looking for funding.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other questions? And, I mean, this speaks to the work that our Public Works team and our engineers, as they're looking throughout the city and prioritizing the areas. And obviously there's a lot of needs in the city, and they're working to be able to address these as they have funding opportunities and opportunities to be able to go for funding. So it's very good. Yeah. So with that, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to adopt.
Second.
That if you could read the resolution.
Resolution number R-33-25, a resolution authorizing the execution of a Washington State Transportation Improvement Board grant application for the Liebecker Sidewalk Infill Project, authorizing the acceptance and execution of the grant agreement if awarded and other matters related thereto.
With that, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes. Thank you. And one more from you, Valerie.
All right, the third and final TIB application we have before you is for their Urban Arterial Preservation Program. And this is for a traffic signal and other improvements at Grand Avenue and Center Street, kind of right by Fire Station Number 1, right in the middle of town. As many of you probably know, since Center Street only has a stop sign and Grand Avenue traffic flows freely here, this intersection gets pretty congested at peak hours, and it's only been growing up Center Street. Lots more interconnectivity up there, lots more housing, and so this is south of the intersection, past the fire station, kind of looking out. We see a few cars backed up there on Center. We see cars trying to turn left onto Center. It can be a difficult place to find a safe gap to turn off of Center there. So the project would add a traffic signal, crosswalks with pedestrian controls, also probably kind of alleviate the grade at Center's approach because it's so steep there. Obviously not alleviating the whole grade, but maybe just at the approach kind of flattening it out. Still a lot of design work left on this one. And then a traffic study has definitely shown and supported that this is going to be a proposed solution that will really help the level of service at this intersection and those delays, the bottleneck, the congestion that occurs here. So if successful, TIB would fund roughly $1.6 million of the total project cost, which is estimated at over $1.8 million. And if selected for award this November, this one's a little bit longer of a process than those other two. We would procure a design consultant early in 2026 and work on design work, working with WashDOT for their approval at various steps along the way, permitting, environmental approvals. That all would be taking place in 2026 and 2027, with construction planned for summer of 2028. Would be the idea if we got this funding. This is in the CIP as being grant dependent, so we're giving it a try with this TIB program. And so in the packet is the final draft form of this application, and we are requesting adoption of the resolution before you to allow us to submit the application and execute the agreement if awarded.
So with that, any questions? Councilmember Parks.
Thank you. This is a dangerous intersection, and we've had pedestrians get hit as well.
Yeah.
And we did improve the lighting there, but it's really good that, will there also be a pedestrian signal crossing Center?
Yeah,
Do you know?
yeah,
Okay.
so there would be buttons that would control both.
Both ways,
so.
okay. And then my second question is, there's been some concern in the community about the placement of vehicles stopped at the light in front of the fire station. So I'm assuming there's going to be a...
Due to them being able to exit emergency
Yeah,
vehicles?
yes.
Yeah. There will be lighting, there will be, kind of like there already is, some flashing lights that say that the emergency vehicles are exiting, but that's definitely going to be a big part of the design work and the considerations. We're going to have that on both sides, and then the eastbound leg of the intersection is the fire station's public parking lot, but then also, yeah, we have to really be taking into account that those emergency vehicles need to egress out of there to just to the south of the
some
intersection.
sort of signal system that activates when the doors raise, or, you know, where people would stop as kind of like the pedestrian beacons,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah, there'll be some flashing lights warning
Yeah.
people that that's going
All right.
on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Weller.
So just a few questions. One, when was the traffic study done? I've heard it's 2017.
Yeah, I think the study itself was 2016, and then there was another, like a compilation of that with some other research done, produced in 2017. So both of those years are kind of involved, but I think the traffic data is from 2016. And so even at that point, they were warranting a signal saying that this is overloaded.
Okay, and how does it, the design align with the complete streets program policy?
Well, I mean, this is not just under the Complete Streets program, but yeah, so it's gonna obviously include crosswalks and pedestrian considerations. At this time, it doesn't involve bike lanes or anything like that. WashDOT is gonna be involved with the process and might come back to us with different requirements. WashDOT might also have their own ideas about what they want to do with Grand Avenue in general overall that are stirring. So yeah, I would say Kara Haley is going to be involved heavily with the project, and she's kind of our Complete Streets go-to person on the engineering side. So we will definitely be making sure that we can align with everything we can there.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, you know, bikeability is extremely important.
Right.
And that we keep that in mind as we move forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Seeing no other discussion, no other questions, with that, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to adopt resolution number R-34-25.
Second.
With that, if you could read it, please.
Resolution number R-34-25, a resolution authorizing the execution of a Washington State Transportation Improvement Board grant application for the Grand and Center Traffic Signal Project, authorizing the acceptance and execution of the grant agreement if awarded, and other matters related thereto.
With that, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Thank you very much, Valerie.
Thank you.
Our next item up is related to the legislative priorities. And with that, first of all, Jeff has some staff perspectives as we go into this discussion.
So just kind of as a reminder, this is kind of a series of meeting topics, I guess. So really tonight is to kind of receive input to be able to bring back a draft at next meeting of legislative priorities with ideally an adoption in early September. What that does is then we're going to be inviting electeds to a meeting probably in late September or hopefully early October to attend, which would also allow that to be sent to them in advance and discussed or addressed with them when they come to our future council meetings. So a few things, and some of these are probably repetitive of what's on the current legislative priorities, which is attached in there for 2025, and a lot of those stay. And a few things that came up from staff, though, I think most people are familiar with property tax, the 1% you've heard me talk a lot about. There was a House bill this year that attempted to address that to allow more freedom at the local level with still some restrictions. I think that's anytime you can provide that local level to make those decisions, I think is important. So I think that's something to continue to keep in mind from a staff aspect. Gas tax versus use tax is one that our staff brought up as we see it increased in EV vehicles. That reduces gasoline tax revenues. They're still trying to figure out how to capture revenues from electric vehicles. There's been a lot of different things tossed out there. One thing to keep in mind is I've heard time tossed out as one case, which obviously, and one is distance. As you can guess, the distance you travel in Seattle for the same amount of time as the distance you travel in Eastern Washington would have very different impacts. So that's something to keep in mind in discussions. I think Dee can attest to the number of public records requests continues to increase significantly. And while we certainly want to maintain transparency, it does have an impact on staff. And more at a statewide level, the local, you're starting to see more and more, I guess what I would probably call frivolous requests, where basically somebody would request records just in the hope that they don't get a response, because that person then can receive financial damages to that person for their request not being responded to. We haven't dealt with that here necessarily, and we certainly haven't paid any fines, but that is something that you're seeing an increase across the state, and certainly become more prevalent here. Housing affordability, I know, was on last year's, and is certainly something to continue. There's a lot of other legislation that passes that affects housing affordability, things like energy codes or building codes. Those quite often increase the cost of housing, particularly in those low and middle income housing, and that's something to keep in mind as other bills pass. Small business and economic development was something on 2025. I think it's something that is good to continue. Anything that's supportive to small business legislation. I know childcare, as mentioned last year, not only is childcare cost an issue, I believe because of some of the regulations, access to childcare, regardless of the cost, is becoming an issue. We've seen childcare facilities close in Pullman, and some of that is just related to compliance with some of the requirements. Bypass was on last year, and I think bypass remains a priority based off of the recent freight study. The bypass is now kind of becoming, instead of a single solution, kind of a compilation of multiple things, and which I think provides some good opportunities to address that, but does make sure that we need to keep that on because it's not really a Pullman issue, it's a regional issue to do those solutions. You've heard us talk a little bit about the biosolids. Currently, they've put in reporting requirements for PFAS and PFAS levels. There's no restrictions on that, but I suspect there's the potential restrictions coming. Usually what they do is put in reporting requirements, and quite often that leads to restrictions. And that, depending on what those may or may not be, that may have some costs on testing and disposal of biosolids in the future. Transportation becomes a critical issue, and one of the things that is talked about in transportation is as they put in standard service levels to make sure that there's consideration for the size of the city in determining those service levels requirements. And then public safety, I know, was on last year. House Bill 2015 certainly did address some things of public safety. There's some things in House Bill 2015 that we're trying to figure out how it impacts us. For example, there's some restrictions, the ability to get money based on if you have a reserve program. And while it's small, we have a very good reserve program here, even though it's small. So some of those things that potentially precludes us from activating some of the things that are in there. So those are just a few things that were brought up as staff. Certainly not an all-inclusive list, but I wanted to share those with you as you start your conversation and what things you want to address in 2026.
Thank you, Jeff. And so as part of the staff report is to help us, understand, from the staff perspective, the areas that they're seeing challenges or ways in which we can influence into the legislative process. If we look at our current priorities, we've grouped them into 3 areas. One is the priority areas that, as a council, that we're taking on. There's city support areas, and as Jeff talked about a number of those things, and then there's down in that community support area. And I'd like for us tonight really to focus on the first page, not on the second page, that is the talking points piece. But within that, so I'm interested just, as a council, this is your document of what are those legislative priorities. You've heard some of the issues that from the staff side, but what are the things that are important to you in this? So with that, I'm going to open it up. And Councilmember Guido.
So I would encourage us to continue with 2 areas of focus of interest to me. Obviously, the housing and affordability needs to remain. And then, having just driven back from Portland today, Highway 26 passing lanes, as such an important highway and used by so many people, particularly coming to Pullman, just really encourage our legislators to continue to look at how we can fund additional passing lanes, increase the safety on that much-used highway. And then would like to see added related to advocacy for funding Grand Avenue. We all recognize that Grand is in dire need of work, and again, as a state highway and used heavily, I think we need to look to our legislators to help fund, obviously, a long-term approach to improving that main drag that goes through our downtown. And, that's something that needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later. So continuing to really focus on that, and would encourage my fellow council members to put that down as a goal, more immediate goal when you're doing your goal setting. Thanks.
Yeah, this is the legislative piece. Well, goal setting is going to come soon. Other comments related to the agenda, the legislative priorities? Councilmember Parks?
Thank you, Megan. Those were actually really good. I really enjoy hearing from the staff because they have a different perspective. They work in this every day. They hear from the public just like we do, but in probably a more utilitarian way than just airing frustration, but actually asking questions and maybe getting some answers. So I obviously the bypass, as Jeff said, we have moved the needle on that a little bit, so definitely that. Small business economic development, I mean, those sorts of things. Those are the ones that, and I like the phrase that says, let's narrow the priorities to priorities that will directly affect community members the most, specifically in reference to the areas of economic development, transportation safety, projects, and livability. So I think that's a nice direction for us to try to abide by.
Councilmember Fajarin?
Thank you. I just have some thoughts as we craft the legislative priorities list. I think it's also important to know who exactly are representatives who are working with. They are folks with deep ties to the 9th LD and fiscally conservative and would like to see less regulation. So I would like us to possibly use that as a filter to maybe move some more things in the priorities areas where we think we can work with our legislators a bit more, along with what they are passionate about. Highway 26 passing lanes, all three of them widely support this, adding more additional passing lanes. And so I think that would actually be an area in the priorities areas list that we might be making more headway in, especially if we're looking on what benefits our community as a whole. I'd be comfortable with moving down, repurpose in-town railways to more community support areas. I think we have a lot of work to do, especially the rail banking group. And I think we have a lot more work in our community to do before we bring it up as a legislative priority. I think affordable childcare should be moved up. That is something that we hear time and time again from our constituents. However, all three of our reps voted against additional spending for major childcare options, specifically Senate Bill 5237. So maybe supporting childcare, but in a way that's not linked to additional tax increases. And then I also support what my colleague, Councilmember Guido, said about housing affordability. And so those are just a little bit of my thoughts, is tailoring more of our priority areas to something along the lines where our representatives in the 9th LD would support. So those are just my thoughts.
And for clarification, if we look, the priority areas are these are areas the city is working on. The city support areas are the ones that the city is working on. The community support areas are the areas that the city is not working. So like we're not working on the passing lane, so we can move the passing lane up and down within that area, but we don't bump it up into the other areas. So, and maybe it's better to with those three labels, better label to put that understanding.
Yes, please, that would be good. But I still probably stand by I say is finding more priority areas in which all three of our reps, both of the House and the Senate, kind of agree on.
Councilmember DeLira, sorry.
No worries. I have 2 points that I am hoping to see. The first one is I wonder if we could create some more specificity under the business, nonprofit, and economic development around supporting small Washington rural communities that border Idaho, perhaps advocating for lessening regulations for towns like ours. I don't have specific wording, but something that reflects more specifically to small towns in Idaho, that border Idaho. So that's one point. For the affordable higher education, I do have some wording for this, and it's mostly to be more specific. So I would like it to read, support accessibility and affordability of higher education by continuing to fund and expand tuition reduction programs at a level necessary to make tuition affordable, such as the Washington College Grant, since that's been kind of like their cornerstone issue that they're always advocating for.
Okay. Others?
Just a point of clarification. Are we eliminating any of these things now?
I think we're adding right now. If there's a particular area that you feel is no longer an issue.
Well, I mean, only to where we've mainly, addressed some of these things and they fall into different priority areas. That was my only question.
If you have an area, I mean, obviously, we need to keep this to one page.
Right.
Because, and we don't want a list that's so big that we're not very clear and pinpoint in the areas, and that's kind of what, obviously we need to, what's the ask, and I know that, with the bypass, we had an ask last year. Megan was suggesting adding in Grand Avenue with a specific dollar ask, and that's, we'd have to figure out what do we see as our priority in that way when we go to our legislators, because they don't, one ask I think is, when we're looking at dollars, is going to go better with them than multiple asks.
Okay.
So.
Because some of these, I mean, like under priority areas, downtown bypass, we say we have invested over $12 million to update the downtown infrastructure. Well, that's old news. I mean, we don't need that
Right.
anymore.
We're not on those talking points. We're focusing on the first page right now.
Okay, I thought that's where I was. Okay. Oh, well, it depends on which first page you're talking about.
The one at the top, not.
Okay.
No, I understand, because the second was more, is the talking point, so that's, the second page is not what we provide to the legislators, that was our talking points that we use as we're talking to them.
Okay.
Councilmember Parks?
So with that in mind then, because if we move something to the second page, that does not mean we're removing it. It just means we are lowering the level of priority, correct?
The second page is the talking points about what is on the first page.
Well, I'm just wondering, well, okay, then I'll say that. Thank you.
Councilmember Fajarin?
Thank you. I'm going to stand on my soapbox, because I did say I want to, probably the specific request in the legislative priorities is funding for Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. This is a statewide program in many states that is a free gift-giving program for kids 0 to 5. They receive a book in the mail for every single month up until they're 5. And this was originally funded through the legislature, but this last budget cycle, it was removed, and OSPI is doing temporary funding, and I need to look back to see how long they're going to do that funding, but it is not permanent. So United Way Whitman County is currently the provider for this program. They provide all the costs. There is no cost to kids and their families. So this is absorbed all by the funding from the state as well as United Way of Whitman County. And I would like to see, I think when I last looked, it was a couple hundred, at least 300. And I know you're on the board with me, but I can't exactly remember what the last.
I think more like closer to 1,000 children and or families are being served by this program in the county right now.
And so, no, thank you so much for that clarification. And so I would like, if the council would allow me, I would like that specific ask in the legislative priority draft. I did approach all three of our representatives when this program was starting up in Whitman County, and they all supported it.
Okay. One item that we haven't talked about that the staff had brought up is I feel that we do need to have something in here about more local control for revenue options, and not necessarily call out a specific one, but the more options that we have, the more helpful it's going to be as we're moving forward. Any other, and obviously this is going to come, so where we'd go from here is Jeff and I will work in order to bring back a draft that is then going to, you'll review again, so it won't be approved next time, but it would be further after that. So continue on, Councilmember Weller.
So I think the repurposed in-town railway should be renamed to local control of Pullman Railways. I think, being able to hit it in the head. I mean, we want control of our railways, period. I think also I know, Pullman Moscow Regional Airport, we don't need support the expansion. We need support the retention also. SEL was hit by what the state has decided. We continue to see, I think Jeff made a good point of local control of revenue is we need more local control. Things being decided on the west side are horribly impactful here on the east side and have devastating consequences. And we're seeing that with SEL. I would say also, and this is something that I brought up previously, and I don't know how to do this, and this is maybe something we'll need to put to goal setting or brainstorming or whatnot. And it kind of goes along with what I was saying with our website. Being able to elevate the voices of our local nonprofits, organizations, businesses, so on and so forth. Being able to go and, even though Chamber has their own advocacy with legislative, WCU has their own advocacy with legislative, SEL, so on and so forth. Us being able to reiterate some of the things that they say to show a unified force, to help elevate those voices, I think will help the community in general. I don't know exactly how to do that, but I do think that that's something we as a city can help with, and we should be helping with. So I believe I brought this up last time, and I know the comment was made, they have their own. Well, yeah, but we can help. So it's my opinion.
Do you have specific language that you're thinking, or is this still just
It's
a general?
Like many things, and you've heard it before throughout the years, the brainstorm happens, and then I'm not sure exactly how to do it. You're the engineer, so I rely on a lot of your expertise and your
Well, I mean, because I want staff to be able to
I know, and, you know,
Sometimes they can peek into your brain and they understand what's going on there, and sometimes they can't. And it's the same with me.
I know, sometimes I speak in riddles, but I think one thing that I can think of is us being able to see some of the legislative priorities that these organizations have, or requesting and seeing if we can help in some way. I don't know what that would look like, and I don't want our document going to 8 pages or whatnot, but like I said,
Well, because I see it within this business nonprofit economic development group, but where we have some of those things, but
sorry for just throwing that out there,
Okay.
kind of like, here's the grenade. All right,
Okay.
somebody else.
other discussion. Obviously, and we'll be bringing this back.
So is there a way to solicit input that we get all of these priorities in sync with the different groups that run their own priorities? Like for goal setting, we do a call for what, the different citizen groups would like to see. Is there a way to get that same input?
I think it's better for us at this point to have a general item, and then when we're actually going to meet with the legislatures, we have our talking points and that's where that plays into what are there specific things that are going on that are affecting our businesses or our nonprofits that we can do specific talking points to. So I think if we, I think if we try to put every nonprofit into here, it's not going to be realistic for a document. Yeah. Councilman
Agreed.
Parks?
However, if many entities are asking for the same thing,
That's
that can
my
be
point.
powerful.
Yeah.
So if the chamber is and the DPA is, then I think that's where,
Okay.
you
And I can
know,
And
reach
to
out to
have
get
more-
their feedback on
having the
that.
knowledge.
Well,
yeah.
and to have more specificity. Advance a strong supporting business climate through the reduction of non-blah, blah, blah, whatever that says there. What is it that specifically, what are the non-business friendly legislation and rules? What are they that we need to have our legislators look at and address that would, create a better climate? So I think sometimes you get too nebulous and then you lose the value of what you're asking for because they don't know what we're asking for. Did that make sense?
Got it. Okay, so I'll reach out to them on that. Anything else? Okay, great. Continuing on. So at this time, we're going to go into executive session pursuant to RCW 4230 110-1I to discuss with legal counsel representing the city matters relating to agency enforcement actions or to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency potential litigation concerning litigation that has been specifically threatened to which the agency, the governing body, or member acting in an official capacity is or is likely to become a party, litigation that the agency reasonably believes may be commenced by or against the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in official capacity, or litigation or legal risk of a proposed action or current practice that the agency has identified when public discussion of the litigation or legal risk is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the agency. The executive session is expected to last 20 minutes. If it becomes necessary to extend the executive session, someone will return to announce the anticipated additional time needed by the city council, and the city council will return after the executive session. And so we'll go ahead, I'll give you 5 minutes, so we'll start at 7:54, actually 7:53 we'll start. We'll continue executive session for another 5 minutes. We'll continue executive session another 4 minutes till 8:22. It's 8:22. I'm calling the council back into session. And with that, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to authorize the mayor and the Finance and Administrative Service Director to execute agreement resolving employment-related disputes with Michael Urban.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Also motion to authorize the mayor and the Finance and Administrative Service Director to execute agreement resolving employment-related disputes with Heidi Landley.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, if there's no other business, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.